Vermont, October 6th, Route 1130, south to Spruce Peak Shelter. It was cloudy, and it had started to rain lightly when we had crossed Route 1130 and got onto the trail. We had actually done this section in 2001 before we started our plans to do the Appalachian Trail. Dave was 40 at the time, and we remember very little about this section. This is before I even started to take notes on our hiking adventures. Actually, it was before our hiking adventure even started. We were just do some short day hikes at the time. Today was cold with temperatures in the 40s and the air was crisp. However, our hands were freezing. The foliage was beautiful with the fall colors, and even the woods smelled like fall with the falling leaves all around us. I had remembered this trail being mostly flat. My memory was horribly wrong. The trail descended, then climbed, then descended. Yes, more PUDs. We had crossed a wooden footbridge and found a lot of old bricks in the woods. Dave had found a metal sheet on the ground and started to jump on it. He said that it was covering an old well. I don't think that was very smart to be jumping on an old piece of metal covering an open well, but he said that metal was still solid. I remember reading a guidebook of this area that this section was the old Route 1130 in the stagecoach period, so there must have been buildings here at that time. I love finding old roads and old house foundation that were around during that time. The sun had started to come out, but then it just clouded back over again. Good news is that the rain had stopped. The woods here were mostly hardwoods, with some maple trees, so there was a lot of red maple leaves on the ground. We reached a power line clearing, which offered great views on the distant mountains and of Route 1130 below. The trail mostly ran along the road the entire way. We could hear the traffic from the trail along this section. We climbed a short side trail to Spruce Peak. I had not remembered this from when we had done this before. It had a small view of some farms and a gravel bank and the distant mountains. I had guessed that after doing Mount Madison and the Bigelows this summer, that the views would seem very small in comparison, but it was a really nice view in October. The colors were great. We met another couple out for a day hike to Spruce Peak. We pushed on towards Spruce Peak Shelter. I had remembered it as an old lean-to. However, when we reached it, we found a nice clean cabin with a wood stove inside, 4 large bunk beds, new windows, and a table inside. Sometime in the past 7 years, this shelter was remodeled. A man was staying here for 2 days. He told us that he hikes from shelter to shelter and stays a couple of nights at each shelter. He is not a section hiker or a through hiker. We had thought it was late in the year for through hikers on the AT or the LT. We sat a little way away from the shelter to eat our lunch. We met 2 more men with big backpacks on heading to the shelter, and then shortly after a couple had passed us with backpacks on. So I guess that there are still backpackers still out hiking the AT or the LT in October. We never know which one they are doing. The nights are cold this time of the year, and today it was only in the 40s during the day. I was feeling a little like a wimp on this trip, just doing day hikes after backpacking in the Bigelows because I did not want to camp out in the cold. Instead, we are staying in a nice warm place in Manchester and doing just day hikes. On the hike back to the car, it started to hail out and the temperatures seemed to have gone down some more, and then the sun came back out. But it was not a warm sun, as it was around 4 o'clock, and it would be around 6 o'clock by the time we got out. We stopped at the parking lot and found a nice place to cook our dinner in the woods. We are staying at the Equinox, a 4-season resort. I work at a spa and got a gift certificate to stay here. It was not free, but we did get a discount. Meals are not included, so we cooked and ate our dinner in the woods like we would do on our backpacking trips. We had seen some asters and goldenrods that were still out. I saw an interesting purple flower near the parking lot and some cattails and a white berry flower. We had seen a large bird near the cliffs under Spruce Peak, and we heard some birds while we were eating our lunch. High points of today's hike was the shelter and the small amount of sun that we had. The low points was the cold and the hail. October 7th, Mad Tom Notch Road south to Bromley Mountain. The day was cold and windy with the temperatures in the 30s. It was sunny with really blue skies. We had stopped at the ranger station to get directions to Mad Tom Notch Road, a dirt road. He gave us good directions, and we were able to find the trail with no problems. This road was passable by car. It was cold out when we started the trail, and we put on our rain gear for warmth. The climb did not seem too bad, but as it was so cold, it had kept us moving just to stay warm. This section was mostly hardwood with some maple trees, and with the sun out, the colors just popped out and was fantastic, better than yesterday. The wind was brutal out here, making it even colder as we climbed and descended before entering a nice pine forest which helped to block the wind. We reached a view of the ski lift on a top of the mountain ahead of us. We were almost there. It was a short hike and we were only doing about 4 miles out and back. As we neared the top, we saw a cement block, like one that would hold a tower, with a N and AS on it for north and south. There was a chairlift, a gondola, a warming-up building, and an observation tower at the top. We were here from Route 1130, 7 years ago. I did remember the observation tower, but I did not remember seeing the gondola. I remember the chairlift and the observation tower, but not the warming-up building near the observation tower. The building was unlocked, but I did not want to eat inside the building because it smelled of cigarette and beer. We went back outside and ate our lunch on the bench of the building's porch. It was nice here because it blocked the wind. A couple came up to the building with a dog with blue eyes. They went inside to eat, but the dog sat outside and watched us as we were eating. We headed back to the car and saw a lot of thru hikers heading south on the trail. Southbounders on the AT or the long trail. There are still a lot of backpackers on the trail in October. We saw 2 garter snakes sunning themselves on the trail. Dave almost stepped on them. The afternoon was warming up a bit, so we took off our rain gear. We had put them on as a windbreaker, but now it was not as windy as it was when we started. We had made it back to our car early. It was only 2:30, and there was a lot of people in the parking lot just starting out onto the trail. They were mostly Vermont cars in the lot. I think that the local people hike here between 2 and 6 o'clock. October 8th, Old Rooteville Road south to Branch Pond Trail. We had parked on Old Rooteville Road in the town of Manchester. It is a dead-end dirt road that had become unpassable by our car and turned into a 4-wheel drive road. We got here at around 9 o'clock. It was cold out again, with temperatures at 36 degrees, but the day warmed up quickly up to around 70 degrees, with no wind today. It was really the best day for the weather of this trip so far. The colors were at full peak now and was falling to the ground around us. I was awed over all the many different colored leaves. The hobblebush, with its large low leaves, had turned red and purple. The maple trees overhead, with their red and orange maple leaves, and the oak trees, with their golden brown leaves. We had to walk up the dirt road up at about a 70-degree grade to where the trail crossed this road, about 1.8 miles. However, we made good time, and we saw a white blaze on a tree near the dirt road, and we had finally made it to the AT. It took us about an hour. We saw a sign near the road that said, "Look up," and then another sign that said, "Prospect Rock." Prospect Rock was a great viewpoint that overlooked the city of Manchester. We could even see the equinox where we are staying. We continued to follow the road for about a half of a mile on the trail before it finally turned off the road and into the woods. We started right off in the mud inside a grown-in area where we crossed a wood bridge. A grouse startled us as it exploded from the underbrush beside the trail. We reached a sign for the Liebrook Wilderness. We turned around here to save this wilderness for another trip. The sign warns hikers that the trails have very few blazes, and that the trail is left wild. We found an old, large metal wheel on the side of the trail with a nice stealth sight with the word Long Trail painted in white with an arrow painted on the wheel. We made it back to Prospect Rock and had our lunch here. Another hiker, a lone male hiker, joined us on the rock and told us that he had dropped his friend off at the AT at the Vermont-New Hampshire line and was backpacking south to the Massachusetts border. He said that he had his car and was providing support. He would do some day hikes on the trail to meet him. He told us that he had spent the night at Stratton Pond last night with his friend and was heading back to the car as his friend continued heading south on the trail. He was parked on Old Rooteville Road, so he had hiked 10 miles today. We continued on the trail heading north to Spruce Peak Shelter. This section was mostly in hardwoods and was similar to the other side of Old Rooteville Road, more PUDs. We reached a ridgeline with the sounds of traffic below from the city of Manchester. We came to a large rock in the middle of the trail that looked like a coffin. It was 2 flat rocks with one of them on the top, and it was the size and shape of a coffin. Dave said that it was almost Halloween and that it was Dracula's coffin. Some backpackers passed us going north to Route 1130. We had seen them 2 days ago, and they did not look very happy. We descended a large hill, which is always bad news because you knew that you would just have to climb up it again when you go back. It was a beautiful afternoon when we reached Spruce Peak Shelter. It was a nice cabin in the woods. There was a wood stove inside, and someone had used it last night, and there was a pile of firewood stacked under the porch. It probably was the male hiker that was staying here for 2 days that we saw on the 6th. No one was here now. Someone had left garbage here, and we had packed it out. There was now a bag of noodles and a bag of flour left inside the cabin. I dumped it outside away from the cabin so that it would not attract mice or other animals into the cabin. I sat down to read the logbook. I wrote about the rocks that looked like a coffin and scolded hikers for leaving trash in the cabin. Leave no trace behind. Shame on you. On the way out, Dave had found a bundle of garter snakes off the trail. He moved the branches around so that we could get a better look at them. They scattered apart, and we found out that the bundle contained about 5 snakes, 2 big ones, and at least 3 small ones. They must have been bundled up to keep warm. We also had another grouse experience. Dave had put some sticks on the rocks that looked like a coffin. It spelled out Dracula, and we laughed as we heard a couple heading in this direction. We got back to Prospect Rock, and several people were now on the rock. It is a popular rock. We headed down the road back to our car, and it was a knee killer on the 2-mile descent. We saw a large bird flying above us on our way out, maybe a crow, and high clouds were beginning to form as we reached the car.